You know? Oh, yeah. Maybe not. I was like, maybe I didn't go. This, I was like, yeah. No, it's rough. This morning, I took a picture set on it.
I get to introduce myself. I'm Alan Blum, and somebody said hello, sir. That's great. Who said that? Good. I thought I heard hello, sir. That was good. I'm in the Department of Family Medicine. I'm a professor, and I have something called an endowed chair, which means that I get a little extra time to figure things out by studying, doing some research. What's the talk bill today? Tobacco cessation. I can understand anybody not wanting to hear a talk like that, right? Is there anybody over the age of 2 that hasn't heard about smoking? That doesn't know about it? So why do we even do this in med school? Why do we even have electron hypertension, right? Which you had last. What was the take-home point there? What was your take-home point for the last talk? Everybody has it. Everybody has it. Good one. Good one. And then here's the tougher point: is what percentage of the everybody knows what hypertension is? Good, good one. That was a good side to side. Yeah. What would you say? Not many. How do you even define hypertension? That's the other. Here's one tip when you're talking to a patient who has the diagnosis of high blood pressure, hypertension. What part of the body are we talking about when we hear that term hypertension or high blood pressure? And watch what people do. What part do you think our population, many of the people, that half, would point to if they're asked, what is hypertension? What part of the body? They go right here because they've heard of stroke, which is bad, but it's associated with hypertension. But you really have to sit and try to figure out how to explain it. And I remember being in the hospital one time on rounds, and we had a subspecialist that was with us. And here we have 500 cable and satellite TV stations and instant internet everywhere we want. And this guy is writing with ballpoint pen on the sheets to try to explain to the patient what something is. So, you know, we're maybe not doing as good a job at explaining what we're trying to do when we talk about improving health. So you're wondering, why in the world did he get involved in tobacco, which everybody already knew? And the problem is that it's been a big, big problem. It's still the leading preventable cause of death and disease in our society, even though nobody in this class smokes. In my med school class at Emory, several people still smoke, and even during the exams, I remember. So this is a really special opportunity, and I'm really pleased to be here because it's an honor to always talk to the Skoke students. But a special honor this year because it's my 50th anniversary from graduating Emory University School of Medicine, and I get to say and do a little bit more than I would normally say and do. And I'm working on a talk called 50 Pearls for 50 Years that I hope to give a little later this year. But right now you're a prime audience because you're beginning your clinical career. And I think rather than, these are Verilux lenses, right? They don't have the lines that you have with bifocal. So I want you to think of your career as a Verilux lens where you don't separate, oh, okay, basic science, I'm over that, past step 1, and now I'm on to the clinical. It's all one line. It's invisible. They aren't separable. So I've learned a lot more biochemistry as a clinician than I think I ever absorbed when I was in medical school. And I appreciate it a lot more now. But similarly, you know, patients aren't really diseases. They are people with stories to tell. And I think that the problem that I see with medical students, of which I am, because we're always all students at all times, there's less of a difference between you and me than there was between you and your last day of college and your first day of med school. You know, you remember going home Thanksgiving. You got all the questions already. Come on, what's this? What's this? You know what it's like. But I think that it's more than putting on the white coat. It's really remembering who you are, your upbringing, and how you're going to apply that, not to pick out the diseases from people, but to learn about the people who may or may not have conditions that you can or cannot help. So I know that sounds a little abstract, but I just don't like the word. That was a great rotation because I saw a lot of pathology. You know, people are not pathology. People are people with sometimes unfortunate conditions. And the great thing about it is that sometimes people don't have the conditions that they think they have. And yesterday morning, I hope we discussed the fears that a person had about her daughter having a certain condition that would be very, very unlikely, but because she herself had had a personal experience with that, she was wondering whether that could be the case with her daughter. So we're applying things all day long, but not just by asking, as you know, the yes and no questions, but really tell me about yourself. And have you ever been asked yet by the patient to tell about you? Have you ever, has the patient said, well, tell me about you? Have you ever stopped and said, let me tell you about where I am, because I don't know you, you don't know me. How often do we grow up with patients that we're now called upon to treat? This city is so segregated still that I do not know where certain neighborhoods are. And I've been to many neighborhoods, but we have to be understanding that this fluorescent lit box is not where we can learn the most about people. We can learn the most in their own environment. So let me give you a quick story. This was shared to me by one of our psychologists that I knew very well at Baylor. In fact, he used to come on rounds. I used to invite him on rounds with me, and he would stay a few minutes after with each patient, and he'd catch up with us. And he'd always sit at the bedside and talk to them. And one patient said to him, are you the heart doctor? And he stopped and he thought a moment. And he said, well, yeah, I guess I am. You know, I mean, that's a psychologist who was able to bring some comfort and relaxation to people in a very tense environment. So he shared this story with me. And it's about a student who said this. During my second month of medical school, our professor gave us a pop quiz. I was a conscientious student and had breezed through the questions until I read the last one. What's the first name of the woman who cleans the classrooms? I'm sure there's some kind of joke. I had seen the cleaning woman several times. She was tall, dark-haired, in her 50s, but how would I know her name? I handed in my paper, leaving the last question blank. Before class ended, one student asked if the last question would count toward our quiz grade. Absolutely, said the professor. In your careers, you'll meet many people. All are significant. They deserve your attention and care, even if all you do is smile and say hello. I've never forgotten that lesson. I also learned her name was Dorothy. I can't think of a better story to sort of, as you embark on clinical medicine, to remember to say good morning to everybody, to not worry that you're going to make a mistake, so that and not look at the hierarchy, so that you're the low person on top. No, you don't want to be made to feel inferior in any way, shape, or form. At the same time, you don't want to tolerate a lot of the superiority complex or the pimping or whatever else that people do to medical students or to residents or to faculty. When I was attending, a lot of the residents pimped me, which was not fun. But I think it's important to just remember that we're in a real human environment that's getting a little less human because we are a little bit devoted to things that I think are not bringing us together. In any event, I put that up on the screen. I don't know if anybody had noticed what school that is and what might be wrong with that picture. Anybody pick up on that?
Pearson County Schools.
Yeah, so that was an actual photograph sweatshirt worn by one of the nurses. This is right after the guy gave $80 million to have the school named after him. And they couldn't even print the sweatshirt right. And then Ashley, who's like everybody's MVP at this college, knows that there's even a... So this is just another quick example of noticing things. So the title, which is sort of long-winded, is adapted from the talk that I just gave last month at the 50th commemoration of this residency program. And it says unfinished business, applying hard-won lessons from anti-smoking advocacy to emerging health problems. So I'm looking at this as a metaphor. Tobacco today, everybody thinks they know it. They don't, but it's a gut. It's simple, right? Everybody knows you shouldn't do it. Therefore, you know, I'll try, but I can't really be successful because I don't really know what to say. I think I can give you a few tips for this. But the importance of it is that you shouldn't ignore things that are that you think are intellectually beneath you. One of the reasons that physicians don't get involved, and this is an example. I'm sorry, I just don't want to single out the scrolling, but I really appreciate that this is the ultimate point today, that we do the attention to the presenter. And the screens are a temptation. They didn't exist 15 years ago. And one of the problems I see today is that we're more devoted to FOMO than we are to reality. And lectures are on the way out anyway. You don't have to hear another lecture. You can watch it on 3-speed. You know, I understand the attendance at lectures now is like 10%. But you're missing the opportunity to interact with real live people. Because 2 seconds earlier, you might have gotten an email. So I think it's real important to cut to the chase and realize that we are using more screens than our patients. It's one of the reasons we don't even ask about screen time. We're still going back to the era of, do you smoke? Do you drink? You know, now it's screen time that I think is the most potent addiction because it's taking us away from relationships. But more on that later. That's one of the emerging problems that I see that I don't see medicine addressing. I see the enormous numbers of ADHD prescriptions rising. What's the treatment for ADHD? What's the treatment for ADHD? What's the gold standard treatment for ADHD? It's not Adderall. That's one hint. How about another answer? Say it out loud, though. And what does it stand for? Don't use acronyms. I would think so, or behavioral therapy. But when a lecturer gave a lecture on ADHD about 10 years ago, not in this room, but in a neighboring room, and I asked the question, I said, you know, most of this lecture has been devoted to medications, about 90% of the lecture. I said, isn't the gold standard for treatment of ADHD behavioral therapy? And he said, and I quote, oh, who has time for that? Give him a drug. Not necessarily free of side effects. And when I see a 44-year-old patient yesterday getting ADHD drugs, I want to know, when was the patient diagnosed? How long have they been taking these drugs? These drugs are not without side effects. But that's an example of where I think our speeded up economy has just got us racing. We got to multitask at all times. I think it's just important to take a look at where we've been, where we are, and what's going to happen. So the Center for the Study of Tobacco and Society sounds like it's concrete, it's focused on tobacco, but our motto is history, metaphor, and irony. So I look at things with a sense of, everybody already knows about smoking, how can I make it more compelling by having them analogize to something else? How have the suntan bed people marketed their lethal product, by the way? Because the rise of melanoma has now been attributed, at least in part, among young women in their 20s to going down in Alabama, which has more sun than most states anyway, to the tanning bed before the prom or whatever, for whatever reason, and releasing those endorphins that hook them to come back to the tanning beds. They've marketed tanning beds in much the same way that cigarettes are marketed. So we're looking at other analogies, digital media addiction, the emergence of vaccine and anti-vaccine disinformation. These are the things that I think you can learn a lot from by studying how the tobacco companies were so successful for so many decades and still are. So I have a website, it's called the Center for the Study of Tobacco and Society, or csts.ua.edu. And we have about 40 exhibitions. We just finished one last week on a kind of a amusing look at the history of the Journal of the American Medical Association and its advertisements. All these amazing ads that it's hard to believe they actually advertise to doctors. And this is the little display case that we have down in the Northeast Medical. I'd love you to come by and take a look. And this morning or yesterday morning, the New York Times called because they heard that I had some hospital ashtrays. So there's a DCH ashtray there, and there's a funeral parlor ashtray, and there's these ironic things. There's even one for MD Anderson Cancer Center, an ashtray that was done. So I left Baylor in 1999 after being in Houston for about 13 years. I was really reluctant to go because I developed all these wonderful multi-generational relationships, such as this one. Their mom was no longer alive, and that's their grandmother and their aunt. And it just was, if I saw them today, we would all hug and everything. Just for getting to know them and appreciating who they are, and they're appreciating what I was trying to do to help. But then I moved over here because I gave the commencement talk at the residency in 1997. And afterwards, the chairman, Dr. Jerry McKnight, asked me if I wanted to stick around. And I thought he meant go out for beer. But he said, no, we got this position here that we'd like to fill. And I thought about it. My mother had attended here partly. I didn't have any other connections to Alabama. And I said to my wife, why not? Let's give it a try. So I've developed other relationships here. And this is actually one family. There's great-grandma, great-grandma, grandma, daughter, and great-great-granddaughters. I saw each of them all in one afternoon separately as their family doctor. Can't say any other field can have that kind of experience. Of course, that's probably the only time I've ever had that many generations in one day, but still, what a treat. And I'll probably see one of them tomorrow. And that's the new other academic family. You may recognize Andrea Wright. She's the director of our medical library and another secret weapon of our college. And about 13 years ago, I went to this other person, that's Nell Williams. She was the director of our medical library before Andrea took over. And I said, how about we get people together once a month just to talk about things that aren't purely medical? We have a little dinner, we have we talk about art, Shakespeare, music, whatever, to give people an idea that medicine is not just about diseases and being in the hospital and how much pathology we see. So we started this and we've done over 150 of these. And one of them is going to be tomorrow night. And I'm really honored because I think I've interviewed one Nobel Prize winner. I was the last person to interview Dr. Demajan, who invented anybody know what he invented? Raymond Demajan. He did not get the Nobel Prize for this, but two people who used his work did, and there was some controversy. Who invented, how long have we had the MRI? When was the first MRI? 70s is a good guess. That's actually when it was developed. When did DCH get its first MRI? Only about 20 or so years ago. So it's that recent. Who was the first to do a heart catheterization? How long have we had heart catheterizations? This is interesting because I use all my own students, I always ask, and nobody really knows this question. Why is this important? Because it gives you a sense that not all this stuff has been available to us for that long. So how long, let's just take a wild guess. Take a guess, how long has cardiac catheterizations been in existence?
Around 20 years.
Try. What's yeah.
My name's Griffin.
Yeah, hi, thank you.
35 years.
Good guess. Any more?
Like, it's been a while, like 60 almost.
60, a little bit closer, yeah. A little older than that. Who was the first person to do that? That's the key. It's a real good story. Let's see. How did you know? I think someone could. And there's a book called The Man Who Touched His Own Heart. And what happened? He went to his professors. He said, if we want to see what's really going on with the beating heart and what might be blocking, let's put some dye and we'll go and it should go there. And the professor said, no, that if you touch the heart with a catheter, that's going to send it into VTAC. You can't do that. So he got his girlfriend and another friend. And that night they went, this is the story, they went to the radiology suite and they got a catheter from somewhere and they injected this thing. They took pictures and they showed it the next day and that changed history. It took a while for this to get recognized. He did not get recognized for about 30 years for this. But this was in Germany and it was during, the lead up to World War II. So that may be explaining one part of it. But still, we haven't had it that long. When I was a med student, I saw my first catheterization in the mid-70s. And it was actually quite a revolutionary thing. Also, remember the woman that was monitoring somebody was smoking a cigarette. But in any event, CT, fairly recent, 1980s CT, ultrasound, not that recent. We had Dopp tones, but I did my ultrasound with a stethoscope, and even we did amniocentesis with a stethoscope. So we've come a long way in that regard. But keep in mind that it's not the technology that advances things. It's the application. So I know that you're all better at using ChatGPT or AI than I am or ever will be. But there's a difference between the users of ChatGPT and AI who've been in this a long time and those who are just entering and who look at the answers, so to speak, that AI spits out. And they say, no, I'm sorry, professor, it says this is it. No, when I've seen 30, 40, 50 cases of something and AI says it's something else, I'll take the person who's seen 30, 40, 50 cases than the descriptions that put in to get the AI generated answer. That's another story. So we developed the Art of Medicine rounds. And this was a physician who and I show this purposely because he was injured in his senior year of medical school. His life changed. He became a quadriplegic. He finished med school, he was named by his class to all sorts of honors. He then did a family medicine residency. He was accommodated. And he actually was out in practice. He became too debilitated, though. Now he's in an assisted living home. But he's one of the most incredible people I've ever met. How did I meet him? I was sent a manuscript to review by the Canadian Medical Association Journal, in which he talked about how the quality of care is declining because the resources are drying up and Canada doesn't seem to care. That's their number one thing in Canada, is their healthcare system. Everybody is proud of that. I did my internship in Montreal. It's an amazing system. There's nobody who goes bankrupt in the Canadian healthcare system for simply trying to get treated. And we don't seem to appreciate that in this country. And that's a terrible, terrible thing. So it's not political, it's just reality. But Mark gave us a wonderful talk. And this was the one we had this past month. Karen Shapiro is a history professor at Duke. And she wrote me a year or so ago, wanting to use a couple of my images from the Tobacco Center in a documentary that she was doing about South African doctors who went out into the rural areas where the poorest of the poor Black patients were, and they revolutionized healthcare. She brought them empowerment. And the apartheid government was so upset with them for giving better health than many of the other whites had gotten that they basically forced them out of the country. They landed in North Carolina, where they helped revolutionize healthcare in southern Mississippi and rural Georgia and rural North Carolina. And that film won the Toronto Women's Film Festival Award. We showed the first time in the United States that a film has ever been shown. We showed about half of it. And that's from Don Nakayama. He's the dean of Mercer Medical School. And he's going to be our first three-time speaker, but he's also an amazing historian. Don Nakayama's parents were incarcerated in California during World War II for being of Japanese ancestry. And he talked about that in one of his presentations. This was about the role of women surgeons and how art reflected the rising role of women in surgery. This is Mike Royer. Some people might have grown up with him on TV. He was a famous reporter. He worked here at UA for a while, and he talked about his career. This is Sean Bowman, who is a medical student that did a research project with me where he adapted some of my sketches of patients and the little stories that people told me into songs. And Sean got to perform this at a conference in Quebec City. And he also is just brilliant. He went into psychiatry and is finishing his psychiatry residency at Vanderbilt. And this was the Reverend Dr. Daniel Paul Morrison, who's like the greatest storyteller I have ever heard. And he just talked about some wonderful stories of his rural Pennsylvania area. And he'll be coming back. This was Dr. Demajan. This was the very last interview he gave, unfortunately. What a nice gentleman, very modest guy who invented the MRI. And this was John Giggy, a professor of history at UA, who is part of he helped create the National Monument for Peace and Justice in Montgomery, which if you haven't been, we need a field trip to go there. It's just,
I'm sorry.
Oh.
They got heat under TV this Monday because they did the civil rights shirt out.
oh, that's right. Oh, how could I forget? That's great. Excellent. And Connie Leeper, who's now in Fresno, California, she taught us how to dance some samba and some other things. So that's my mom. She went to this university for a while, for at least a year or two. I donated her scrapbooks to Hool, the archives, and it says that she, attractive daughter of Goldstein from Atlanta, represented the University of Alabama in a debate recently at Columbus, Mississippi, and won a unanimous decision over Mississippi State College for Women. So that was her. They didn't have name, image, and likeness back then, but she could have made a fortune as the debating champion, I think. And that was my dad, who was a family doctor. We called them general practitioners then. I grew up with him, and a great, great influence on me. Unfortunately, you might recognize someone in this photograph. Do you? Anybody see anybody that you know in this photograph?
Maybe the one at the bottom left.
Yeah, where, bottom right. That's it. Yeah, right. Your left. Right. Yeah, your left. Yeah, that's me with the ever-present cigarette of my father over my shoulder. Yeah, unfortunately, he started smoking in med school. How about that? And whenever they go out to dinner, their dinner parties were big. They always did. Now, if you think this is getting too personal, well, I brought you a picture of my circumcision just to make it even more. So this is what I grew up with.
Now you can bring him in, Jack.
All right, charge this one now, Rich.
Charge it, Richie.
Charge this one now.
What? Bad bounce. Bad bounce.
Come on, boy.
Here we go. Get this
Come
one.
on in now, Rich. Come on. Stay right on it now.
This away. Give him a nice hand. Bring him in here.
Well, who watched it? Couple of baseball fans, right? That was quite an ending. It made history with the slugging thing. I like the old fashioned. I'm a purist, but who is that? Who is that, by the way? Call you back. All right. Who's that? You know who that was? Yeah, you recognize by the number 42. You are a good baseball player. Did you play yourself?
I did for a short time, and then I said, oh, boys doing spit and wrestle, so.
We're talking about Jack for a second. Yeah, okay. Hey Lou, I'm in a conference. I'll go like that. Thanks. No, don't know who it was, but so he was a great player. But did you notice something else in that video? See when the kid caught the ball? Light of Lucky. So everything was associated with sports. My father said to me, why don't you record some of these things? That's not what I recorded, but I recorded with an audio tape recorder, some of these cigarette commercials. Because he said, this is in the late 50s, he said one day nobody could believe that they promoted sports and cigarettes. And one of our exhibitions online you could look at is called Sports and Cigarettes Equal a Losing Team. And we looked at Alabama programs. All the football programs in the 40s and 50s had cigarette ads in the back cover. They still have alcohol ads in our game day. Now they're selling alcohol. I don't know which direction we're heading here, but it's weird. So there was Jackie promoting all gold cigarettes, and he wasn't loyal to a brand, but he was the most valuable player. He was promoting branded cigarettes, and then there was Joe DiMaggio, who was his counterpart in the American League, all promoting. This is the kind of generation I grew up with, and believe it or not, you can turn on TV and see ads like.
What cigarette do you smoke, doctor? Tens of thousands of doctors in all branches of medicine in all parts of the country were asked that question. What cigarette do you smoke, doctor? The brand named most was Camel. Yes, surveys show more doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. Smoke Camels, the cigarette so many doctors enjoy.
Believe it, huh? But, you know, my father would come home and he'd plunk down his Journal of the American Medical Association. It would land with a thud. And these were the kind of ads that you would see in the Journal of the American Medical Association. So my entreaty about the scrolling did not last more than about 10 minutes. Okay.
I actually have
fact checking.
Doctors Love Camel ads. I was going to show
Okay,
you.
good.
In my
Thank you. You're checking my own exhibition on that subject. Thank you. Okay. Just, you know, we presenters have these eyes that look at it. Okay. So that was the original Surgeon General's report. That is what I call the landmark health document of the 20th century, because that said, after so many decades of where the tobacco companies said, oh, smoke for your health, these group of people said, no, that's not how it works. We've reviewed over 5,000 studies published on smoking. The entire history of this shows that this is the leading cause of lung cancer, emphysema, and heart disease. That's 1964. And that was Dr. Luther Terry who released that. And who was Dr. Terry? Guess where he was from? Red Level, Alabama. And that's
Tonight, CBS Reports begins with this historic announcement by the Surgeon General of the United States on January 11, 1964.
It is a judgment of the committee that cigarette smoking contributes substantially to mortality from certain specific diseases and to the overall death rate.
Something that seems so obvious to us. They had to get a whole panel of people, and one of the other people on the panel was Dr. LeMaitre, who was from Tuscaloosa, a graduate of this university, who became chancellor at the University of Texas System. And so Alabama actually had 2 people on this panel of total of 11. The only state that had more than one was Alabama. So there is a connection to smoking to our state. And this was important, but it didn't even make the front cover of the next week's issue of Life magazine, which was the big weekly publication, because there was a cigarette ad on the back cover. And this was how it made news all over the world, actually. The lead story in the New York Times, cigarettes peril health, or tie cigarettes to cancer, tie cancer to cigarettes. Everybody heard this. It was done on a Saturday so the stock market wouldn't crash from the tobacco stocks, but it's a very important milestone that we thought would change everything, and it didn't. This was my first editorial written the same year when I was editor of my high school paper. That shows you that I'm really probably the longest continuous person on this field. But this is what I could come in like very time and watch.
Flintstone, brought to you by Winston, America's best-selling, best-tasting filtered cigarette.
Winston tastes good, like a cigarette should.
And if you think that's bad.
Marlboro country.
You can come on tonight with a Marlboro filter flavored Pamper box.
Come to where the flavor is.
famous Marlboro Red or new Marlboro 100s, the Longhorns. Come to Marlboro country.
And why did they go off the air? Anyone know why the cigarette ads aren't on the air anymore? Well, that's a good point. Close, but not really. That's a good point. What does the FCC stand for? Federal Communications Commission. Any other thoughts?
I'd say they don't have to market anymore.
Oh, interesting. Cheaper, just not because everybody already, well, unfortunately, Coca-Cola couldn't stop marketing. Pepsi would run away with everything. Right? So marketing is necessary if you're going to promote your brand. That's not a bad idea because actually there was some collusion.
Isn't it illegal now? But I don't know who made it illegal. But I know it's illegal to market it.
It's not. You can actually advertise cigarettes today. It's sort of weird, but the advertising on TV specifically was banned by Congress, who asked them to ban their ads. It was actually not the Cancer Society, which had been asking for this for a long time. It wasn't the broadcasting companies doing this on their own. They needed the money. It was actually not the Boy Scouts, not the hospital people. It was the tobacco companies themselves. Why was that? Because they had these anti-smoking commercials that had come on thanks to a lawyer who sued the FCC to have what they called a fairness doctrine application. So the anti-smoking commercials would go on. So the industry got off of TV because they came right back the next day with the Virginia Slims tennis tournament, the Marlboro Cup horse race, with the billboards in the back of the TV so that you could actually advertise cheaper by sponsoring a sporting event than having to buy commercials. So that's the example at Shea Stadium, New York, that I shot on my home television screen. Can you read the warning label on the bottom? I mean, it just shows you how silly we thought we were by banning something. Better to counter-advertise than to ban.
Some things are so much with us that we hardly notice them anymore, but they affect us whether we are aware of them or not. Advertising is like that, and the most heavily advertised product in the world is cigarettes. More than half of the billboards you're likely to see are selling this single product. And what they're selling is a hoax. This ad tells you that smoking is likely to make you into a man. It's more likely to make you into a corpse. But I had to come all the way up here to read the health warning in the fine print at the bottom of the ad.
So I paid a guy $50 to let me climb up on that billboard, which is in Times Square, New York. I don't like heights, and I'm staring straight down to the street. But it gives you it's the immense size of these things that was viewed by 1 million pedestrians every week in New York City. Sure.
Is that you?
Yeah.
Oh.
So, I rescued this film. We never finished the film, but I rescued this little video. And we had plans to make a much broader film about how they get into our minds without our realizing it. And there we were. So that's me on the same billboard, just to give you an idea. I didn't even come up halfway to the O of the Marlboro. And so we got an idea. I started a group called DOC, or Doctors Ought to Care. And we started in Miami, where I was doing my residency, to buy bus benches. And they were cheap, and we could make fun of the tobacco companies that way. And we did this in front of the Papa Nicolau Cancer. That's where the pap smear was invented, right there. And so we got right in front. They didn't like this. They didn't like this little group of doctors taking out ads talking about smoking. And we also had things like
Alan Blum represents what he calls the new breed in doctors. Unlike his predecessors, the young family medicine practitioner thinks doctors should become more involved in informing patients against health hazards. Blum went so far as to form an organization called DOC, which stands for Doctors Ought to Care. The purpose is to de-emphasize cigarette smoking, obesity, and alcoholism.
A lot of people say, well, you physicians, you should be confined to your offices. We feel as though really, if we can't get out and intervene and help our patients, then we ought to make sure that the tobacco companies might be prevented from doing that as well. But they think that they can invest $400 million every year to tell us what to do and to make us become cigarette smokers. We think we can devote a few $100s in Dade County to try to raise the consciousness of people, to show people that cigarette smoking is not only a ripoff, but contains things like arsenic and cyanide and several other 100 chemicals.
DOC was formed just 6 months ago, and its membership includes 40 physicians in Greater Miami. Blum is also urging his peers to revert back to what he calls old-time medicine and house calls.
Most of DOC's small advertising budget is spent on bus benches like this, which read, "Hospitals and smoking don't mix," right, Jackson? Right. I'm Bob Jackson, Channel 4.
When I got here in 1999, smoking was still perfectly permitted in this hospital. It wasn't until what year do you think they banned smoking at DCH? 2015. Oh, and did they brag about it? Like, hey, we're going to smoke. Hey, look at us. Look at us. No, the movement to ban smoking in hospitals, Seventh-day Adventist hospitals have never permitted smoking. You go to Loma Linda, California, you won't find any smoking for 50, 60 years that even our existence at a hospital. So we made a big deal about doing what we should have done in 1964 when the Surgeon General said this. In fact, my first day on rounds, I said, where's so-and-so? He was one of the residents. He said, oh, he's down getting his skull down at the gift shop. So we took a look at macho ads like this, I smoke for taste, and we got a much more macho guy saying, hey, I smoke this stuff. And that's the kind of thing that really pissed off the Cancer Society. Oh, no, don't do that. You're going to get sued. Oh, no. So I said to the Cancer Society, why don't you have 364 Great American Smokeouts and give the tobacco companies 1 day a year to smoke in? I mean, that's the Great American Smokeout. 1 day a year, they have their little publicity stunt to get people to stop smoking. That's ridiculous. And we've always ceded this to the big people. Now we're ceding it to Microsoft and Google. And these are our behemoths that we have to deal with today that own and control just about everything. Tobacco companies were fairly easy compared to what we're dealing with today. We're like serfs. Every time we go on to the internet, we have no control. We think it's free, but we're actually surrendering an enormous amount of our own personal information. But you can see this campaign developing. You know, he goes to a party, you got a light, or the couple of the 1980s when we created these ads. You know, and I then became an editor after doing my family medicine residency. I took a sort of a detour. And I became editor of the Medical Journal of Australia and then the New York State Journal of Medicine. And these are the very first issues on tobacco ever published by a medical journal in the United States. And we got a lot of attention. Physicians had not ever read a cover-to-cover medical journal devoted to what they thought was pretty intellectually simple. We looked at what was going on all over the world, in the Philippines, in Malaysia, in areas that were in Africa that were very impoverished. We looked at the filter being a fraud. The filter does not confer any advantage to cigarette smoking, but people think it's safer because they hear it's got a filter, like an oil filter. And these are things that just hadn't entered the mind of most physicians. And at the time, there were still a lot of physicians who still smoke. About 67% of physicians smoked in the late 40s when my father smoked, and the 50s. But by 1964, when they got those Surgeon General's reports, physicians were the first to really stop smoking. Unfortunately, nurses and respiratory techs are still among the highest that still have smoking. This is what we've lost. 25 million people directly attributable to cigarette smoking. That's probably a minimum estimate since the Surgeon General's report came out. It's like the entire population of the state of New York, just gone. And if you look at the top 10 causes of death, there's only one thing that I've been able to figure out that connects all of them. Accidents, meaning fires, COPD, of course, stroke, cancer. Now, heart disease is not related to cancer except through smoking. So the number one preventable cause of death and disease in our society is, say it out loud, well, not. Tell me what you had for, you know, if you're doing a dietary, you don't say, what do you drink, or what do you say, what kind of soda, what brand soda do you buy? Because you're getting to know people, or if you're smart, you can probably figure it out. Did you have your diet Mountain Dew this morning? And you'd be amazed, because you play the odds. That's what most people drink anyway. 35% of Coca-Colas in the South are drunk for breakfast. Think about that. I mean, I didn't grow up drinking soda for breakfast, but you know, this is our patient population. But try doing brand name histories instead of just tell me what you ate. The one meal I do say, as I do ask the question, what'd you have for breakfast? Because I want to hear that everybody's eating breakfast, but that's another. But this is where we are. And people don't even remember the Marlboro Man, but they remember that music, which was from the Magnificent Seven. Here we are. This is the perspective. So the rapid fire rest of this talk is, let's see what we can translate to do. We're dealing with something that kills almost 500,000 people a year, 1 in 5 deaths, heart disease, COPD. It's easy to list the things that smoking doesn't cause. But the next time you hear a debate on rounds between which cephalospore or which fluoroquinolone we're going to offer to this person with communicable pneumonia, stop and think a minute if that patient probably wouldn't have been there if it weren't for cigarette smoking. So let's put things in perspective and not get all caught up in tertiary care medicine. We have to treat and help the patient. But let's begin to shift our focus to thinking of all the expense and all the needless suffering that we could save if we work on them when we have a calmer environment in the outpatient setting and when we go into schools and talk to kids. Be amazed when you go into schools, and I still do this and talk to kids. You ask kids, how many in your family still, it's amazing how many pawpaws are still smoking. Or my pawpaw died of lung cancer, that kind of thing. So be thinking of this and not just on the individual patient. Look at all these factors in pregnancy and adverse effects on, it's even, I hate to even say this, sudden infant death syndrome is correlated. You don't want to say that to anybody, oh, you smoked. No, you're not blaming people. You're trying to educate. But it's enormous what we're facing, both cost and suffering. If you look at where we are, Alabama is in kind of the second tier of prevalence. You know, these three states, West Virginia, Kentucky, and Louisiana now are the number 1, 2, and 3 states for smoking, but Alabama is still right up there along with Mississippi. And if you look at our annual deaths, it's hard to fathom that 6,000 Alabamans are dying every year from smoking. It's just not in the news. What gets in the news? Every automobile accident to which we're all exposed to. And how many automobile accidents are there that result in fatalities per year in Alabama? Take a guess.
Maybe 100.
Well, there's more than that, but it's about a tenth. So it's about 1,000. So it's not a tenth, it's about a sixth or a seventh. But every one of those will be in the news. And I hate to say that, you know, but it's that one thing is more important. And people tend to think of people who smoke, oh, well, they deserve it because they smoke. But look at the breakdown. Most of smoking's toll is not lung cancer, it's heart disease. And this ties in with your last lecture because that is a factor that you just can't ignore. And how does smoking affect the heart? Well, you're breathing in carbon monoxide and all these other chemicals and nicotine that races the heart and so forth. So it's not something that's hard to understand, but that gives you the breakdown. By the way, diabetes is made much worse by smoking. A patient yesterday lost his limb. I said, I've never met anyone that lost his limb at 22. He said, oh yeah, I smoked and I did so many things with my body in my teenage years. And he also was diagnosed with Berger's disease, which is unusual in someone that age. But the good news is that everybody does want to stop, at least most people. And Alabama leads the country in quit attempts. That's something I was able to find. That means that we have the highest quit attempt that where you stop smoking for at least a day or two every year. It's something like 63%. It's more than any other state. So that's good news that we are beginning to get out the message. But only about 1 in 20 succeed. And one of the reasons they don't is they're not getting enough reinforcement from their physician who doesn't think that he or she is effective. They don't really want to offend the patient. They don't want to think that this is going to really matter. It does matter. If you touch their forearm and say, good, I'm glad you're cutting back. I'm glad you're stopping. You're saving money. You're saving your health. That's great. All these excuses. Oh, I don't have enough time. I don't get enough reimbursement. I don't really know how to do it. You get an OSCE, right? Ask, assist, advise, you know, I don't even, and then you do what? Pre-contemplation. What's the next one? Have you heard of that? Good, good. That's the stages of change where they say, oh, you're not supposed to talk to people that are in the pre-contemplation. That means they're not even thinking about it. Nonsense. I think that's an artificial construct. It's not an awful thing. I think it gives you some guideline that you got a real refractory person here. But you can broach the subject, you can give them a little laughter and say, come on, let's give it a try. That's not going to offend them. And I think it'll get them thinking because they respect you for your knowledge and your judgment. That's why they come to you. When you hear the phrase non-judgmental, that's a different word. People are coming to you for your medical judgments. They don't want to be judged as to their gender or their sexual preference, but they want your judgments. So that word non-judgmental is not fully accurate. So consider the obstacles and don't pay attention to them. Look at all the benefits. It's not just that you're going to maybe get longer life and better lung health, but you get some positive value. You can actually walk further. You can feel better. This is a simple calculation that you can make by simply calculating how many inhalations. How many cigarettes, how many inhalations in a cigarette? It's 10. Multiply by 20, which is in a pack. That's 200 inhalations of cyanide, carbon monoxide, ammonia every day. It's like going up to one of these Tuscaloosa trolleys and saying, excuse me, can I go to your exhaust pipe? And oh, that's so, you know, that's like, and you breathe in, it's like 750,000 inhalations a year. It's just astounding if you count, it's 70,000 I calculate 70,000 a year, and then you extrapolate to 10 years, it's 3/4 inhalations of that stuff. What about tar? But doc, I smoke Carlton because it only has 1 milligram of tar. Right? You've heard that, right? And I say to her, but Susan, you don't understand, she sounds like a pro, right? She's only 30 years old, 40 years old, but this is what they don't, it's something that we need to sort of break the ice on. What is tar? You know what tar is? Take a guess.
I guess chemicals mixed up.
Yep, yeah. It's the residue of what you get when you burn and you condense it and you fractionate it. You'll get all these chemicals that are in cigarette smoke. It's what I call carbon-rich anabolic products, otherwise known as CRAP or crap. So you wouldn't go out and buy a loaf of Wonder Bread that had only 2 ounces of crap in every loaf. And yet that's how cigarettes are sold. They're sold by low tar. Oh, excuse me, pick me up a can of Starkist tuna, because that has only 2 milligrams of mercury in every can. Wait a minute. Wait. I'm not going to pick you up mercury. So, think about this, but this is my contribution to medical science, the inhalation, instead of pack your histories. What pack your histories is just another BS term. Hits to the wallet. So I was talking to a patient about how much he was smoking. He stopped me and says, man, I've smoked a Porsche. Because he calculated how much he had spent in his life wasting his money on cigarettes. And he was in the military getting cheaper cigarettes. So here's some tips. Postpone each one. That first one of the day is the most important. When do you light up? If you have people waking up and simply lighting up, that's not a good sign. You've got to get them to postpone it. Use a little substitute, gum, mint, cinnamon, kissing, whatever you want to do. Do not let them light up that first cigarette. You want to postpone it till after breakfast. You don't want to have it with coffee. You don't want to have it in their car. You want to break these ties. Remember going back to ADHD? These are the behavioral tips that you can do with people with ADHD. You don't always have to reach for the medication. Use oral substitutes and do a simple relaxation response. Teach people how to relax. It's hard for us to do because we're racing. But sit in a cool, quiet room, close your eyes several times a day, let your body hang. This was the lead article in the New England Journal of Medicine many years ago called the relaxation response. We need to spend a minute teaching people how to relax for 3 minutes several times a day. These are what I call the adjunctive therapies. These are the ones where, as a resident, and I quote, said, oh, that's right, he was talking to a patient on the phone, you smoke. Okay, so I'm going to call in this new medicine, it's called Chantix, and call me back in 12 weeks and let me know how you did. Not how you give any medicine. How do you prescribe any medicine? Any medicine. How do you prescribe an antibiotic? Do you say, oh, you've got pneumonia, I'm going to give you this antibiotic, it's called Levaquin. Okay, see you. What else are you supposed to say?
Tell them how to take it.
How? You take it like that? I mean, what do you mean how to take it, Caleb?
Number of times per day.
Once a day.
With or without meal.
Right. And what else?
Yeah.
How long? It's be anywhere from 7 to 10 days. Okay. But what's the most important thing you can do if you're going to send somebody home with a medication for pneumonia or bronchitis and you don't say something else? What are they going to do? So dosage, we got that. We'll do 500 milligrams a day, right? But what are they going to do when they go home? They're going to say, oh, he gave me this antibiotic. I can go back to work tomorrow morning, right? No, you enforce rest. You have to have soup and juice and relaxation, somebody to look after you. You don't simply give an antibiotic or any medicine without applying it. How do you use a medicine? You are an agent of change when you prescribe. If all you do is give the prescription, you're not really fully utilizing that. So think about just saying, take this antibiotic, but antibiotics, even penicillin VK does not work for strep unless you say, no, he's not going back to school for 3 days. You're going to rest. I'll give you a note for work, but he's got to rest and do that. And that's what we're missing. We're not telling people how to use medications. So I wouldn't prescribe an e-cigarette for anybody, but I think in older patients, if they do this, that would be a lot better than breathing in cigarette smoke. But these are medicines that I prescribe, but I don't think I do these out of the gate.
A question to you. So on some of those medications like Chantix, aren't there adverse effects?
Oh, indeed. Adverse effects about every medicine, but especially. So in this very building, or no, it was across the street at Caps, there was a speaker from UAB. He was a big shot lung specialist. And he came and he was the point person for Chantix. He was found to have taken over $400,000 from makers of smoking cessation medications. He did say he regretted it. all the way to the bank. But no, I don't mind being cynical about him because I thought he was a nice guy until I learned he was taking all this money. And you don't do that. You don't use your role for that. I did take an honorarium or two from drug companies, but I said, no, I'm not going to mention your product. I don't do that. Silly me. Just by virtue of me giving a talk on smoking, they knew that they could be in the background handing out pamphlets about their drugs. So I learned from them. But to shill for Chantix like he did was, so I asked him, I said, now I've heard that there were 35 suicides in the initial studies of Chantix. He says, well, I think 35 suicides out of 10 million prescriptions is pretty good. I swear to you, that's what his answer was. I think 35 suicides out of 10 million prescriptions is pretty good. I don't. So, you know.
Hey, Phyllis, I thought you quit smoking. You were gonna be my inspiration.
Not anymore. Now I can smoke as much as I like. Now that I got the lung brush.
Lung brush?
That's right, lung brush, created by a small inventor in California who himself enjoyed smoking. Lung brush is the easy, inexpensive alternative to quitting or cutting down.
Here's how it works. Taking hold of the easy grip handle, slide the gentle bristle device past the tracheal opening, back down the windpipe and into the lung itself. The unique lung brush design allows you to remove caked-on tar, smoke particles, even city smog phlegm. Freeing up clogged bronchial passages so vital for breathing and smoking. And lung brush's sturdy design makes cleaning and maintenance a snap. One lung brush may be the only lung brush you'll ever need.
Here's football great Kenny Stabler.
I threw my light and low tar cigarettes away. Now back to my favorite brand again. Thanks, lung brush.
Time to come to bed, dear. Don't forget to brush.
Lung brush, that is. So get into the lung brush habit today. And smoke to your heart's content.
Lung brush is available wherever quality tobacco products are sold.
Only $14.95 from Life Tool.
That's the kind of humor that I think we need. We really need to laugh the pushers out of town. Unfortunately, the cigarette companies have moved on. They're now actually encouraging you not to smoke cigarettes. They're claiming we don't want to profit from cigarettes anymore. They're still selling them, but they're claiming that by 2029, they want to be out of the cigarette business. It's not going to happen. But the reason is because they're pushing vaping. They're pushing their products. And you say, well, at least you don't get all those products of combustion, so it can't be that bad. We don't even know what it can do. We had the epidemic of E-Valley right at the beginning of COVID, which was the lung condition that was really awful. I think it killed about 1,700 cases. I don't know how many people died from it, but it was, what does E-Valley stand for? It was, it's a lung injury from the electronic and vaping inhalation of the material. What is the aerosol that you're inhaling? It's an oil-based concoction with a lot of the flavorings and propylene glycol and other things. And when you heat up that liquid, it releases a vapor that you're inhaling. And it's a kind of a lipoid pneumonia that they got from the very rogue e-cigarette manufacturers that you would send for by mail. So fortunately, we haven't seen that lately, but we don't even know what effect of nicotine is going to be in the long term. But we do know that upwards of 80 to 90% of the fraternity boys at this college, this university, are using what? They're using Zyn, actually, now. That's the hot thing. So I got to know the young lady across the street. The best source of information is at the convenience store at the Chevron. She knows every brand. She knows every fraternity guy that comes in. Because I was looking for cinnamon Altoids. She says, oh, no, we don't have. I said, what do you mean? So just because we can't keep them on the shelves. Because it's empty. Notice the box was empty. So the other flavors were there. She says, no, the fraternity boys, they come over, they load up on those because they spend all their day drinking and vaping, you know, and their breath stinks. So, you know, that's just one of her comments. But she was telling me all the, you know, now it's the Geek Stick is the leading disposable, you know. So I get my information from the street. So it's bad, but without the stigma. And I think that when we consider what is happening now, we're talking about 6th graders, 7th graders, 8th graders doing this stuff because it's easy. You can do it and your teacher doesn't even know you're doing it. This is what the e-cigarette looks like with that little heating element. And it's been in the news. It's been what family medicine physicians are trying to talk about. But look at how they're doing it. They're trying to appeal to you don't have to stop. Really, you can do this as an alternative. So they want to keep you hooked to nicotine. This is something has anyone seen this yet? Okay, you will see this. You will see it this year because it's been approved by who? The FDA. That's correct. I testified against their establishment of a Center for Tobacco Products because I knew this was going to be ridiculous because the FDA was constrained. They cannot ban cigarettes. They can ban cancer drugs, but they can't ban cigarettes by Congress saying you can't ban cigarettes. So what are they doing? They're just basically dithering and saying, well, these aren't as harmful as cigarettes. Well, nobody said they had to be, but but nobody said they were any less addictive. So IQUOS stands for I Quit Ordinary Smoking. And that's what Philip Morris is putting all of its investment in, and this is what you'll see. Usually it'll be the older people, but I think they're going to really aim this time around for younger groups. That was anybody know the name of this fraternity?
Sigma Nu.
Yeah, Sigma Nu. This is about 15 years ago. One of the brothers was a skull rep. That's right after A-Day game, by the way. I shot that photo. And this was Joran van Gruen. Joran was a high school baseball player of some renown. Unfortunately, he got oral cancer as a teenager. He had over 30 mutilating operations. He died in his 30s. He spoke all over the country to kids about what oral tobacco can do. And this is where we are. America's #1. That's women too, by the way. Don't think they don't mess with your teeth or your gums. So that's just another factor. Different flavors, cutting down. There's another brand called On. Ask about this. Let me know because I don't know as much about this as you will probably be able to find. I just showed this picture because when I got here, these were 3 dailies that I could pick up just about every day and read. Anybody ever seen a newspaper here? And when was the last time you picked up a physical? What paper?
It was the Arkansas Democratic Gazette.
Oh, no kidding. Still in print. Okay, cool.
Well, I mean, that was years ago.
Yeah, years ago. Okay. All right, so.
We get the paper every week.
Oh, good. Okay, some newspaper. That's good. Okay, good. This is me. Kyle, what do you got?
I just like the Northport Gazette, but it's not every day.
Right, yeah. But just want you to know what we're missing when we don't have a daily paper. I hear about horrific accidents a week late. I hear about horrible things a week. I don't know what's going on because somebody held this up and said, oh, this is my newspaper. No, don't trust them. Sorry about that. But this is what I grew up with, where everybody read that and they spent a lot of time doing it. That's me when I was 13, reading the Sunday paper. But this is where we are today. This is from a movie called 8th Grade, which is a beautiful movie if you ever get a chance to see it. But it shows how sucked up into the vortex they are. This is an actual picture. This is not this is in fact the zombie apocalypse. So, I mean, I can't think of a reason that we shouldn't be greeting each other, making eye contact, but if this is more important, so be it. One of the students and I did this zombie apocalypse or simply generation denial. He got to present this at the American College Health Association. So if you're interested in working on any project dealing with smoking, digital media addiction, obesity, these are the kinds of things that I'm interested to make metaphors and how we can take that tobacco issue and look at what that's morphed into. This is now, Facebook is the latest Marlboro. This was an editorial cartoon. And this is our problem because we are part of the problem by our own usage. We're robbing our patients of our attention when we spend our time focused on the laptop. We're not really concentrating on their facial expressions. And there's one facial expression that you don't want to miss. And if you miss that because you're down there and you miss this, you can cause lethality. So what is this? Yeah. And this we're seeing for the first time in 30 years. We thought we eradicated measles was officially eradicated 25 years ago from the United States. We now have Measles Bureau in charge of the health of this country. A reprobate, a total immoral reprobate running things and fantasizing about, I hope you know that this is not political, this is reality. Creating notions that fluoridation is, well, in the 60s, they called it a communist plot. I don't think he's saying that now. He's saying, oh, it's bad for it. It's not bad. Fluoridation is, after vaccination and smoking cessation, probably the best things that happened in the 20th century. But I lined up for my polio shot. I lined up with, as far as the eye could see, I remember the day I got the shot. I'm an original polio pioneer. And even Fox News can't deny that we are back into the era of polio. I'm not making this up. You might well see polio. And if you do, you really better talk about it and run fast because I do a whole other talk on polio. But this is the kind of thing that we lined up for cheerfully. What has happened to the sense of understanding this is the greatest advance in medical science, as far as the eye could see, lining up for this. And Desmond Tutu, this is about 15 years, he said, we're this close to eradicating it in the whole world. And now we've actually gone back. Afghanistan, Pakistan, parts of Africa are now on the verge, Haiti, India are back, possibly on the verge of getting polio again. And guess where else? The United States of America. Because we have Looney Tunes, absolutely Looney Tunes running the most important health bureau in the world. And we don't even have half of us getting a flu shot. It's not harmful, but because every medicine has harm, every single medicine can have harm. We don't want to make the exception, the adverse reaction. I've seen one adverse reaction to a COVID shot. They had to get hospitalized overnight. That was it in all the years of vaccination. But, this is where we are. We're totally addicted to a different form of things. It's not nicotine necessarily, but it's social media. We're more devoted to that than to the real world. And we're even, limiting our children in conversing and growing up in a world that's not, free. Go right ahead.
Do you feel, or like, have you seen that like the pendulum may be swinging a little bit the other way, with, like our generation having children? Because I think we're seeing like 4, 5, 6-year-olds that like can't get off their iPads, and we're like, that would not be my kids. Like, do you think that is like actually, we
Yeah.
say that. Do you think that we're gonna hold to that? Like,
I'm hopeful because I understand there is cloning technology, and if we could clone you, then we would be okay. But the fact is, I still don't see that, but I'm glad that you're hopeful. But I'm hopeful. I mean, I'll go with you. But there are real problems already, no joke. We're talking about loss of sleep. We're talking about there's an optometrist at UAB. She's working on this. She's looking at effects of looking at pixels all day long, what that does to your eyes while you're walking. Think about that. And text-neck, real thing, and sedentary behavior. So, another interest of mine has been obesity. Everybody knows that. And we've got to take another stance. We've got to look at what we can do at a population level and individual level to counteract this. So I urge you to drop down to the center. This is one of our online exhibitions. And join me, come down, talk when you see me. This is another example. So that's the exhibit. Again, that's me. That's the contact information. And I really appreciate you staying over a little bit for this. Great. Well, one last quote. We don't learn from experiences. We learn from reflecting on experiences. So I hope, again, as great a time as you'll have on the wards and in the clinics, reflect on them each evening. Write a little journal or something. I mean, I'm still thinking about the case that we saw yesterday. Gentleman losing his leg at 22. I mean, whoa, I got to reflect on and how he talked about it and his loss of just so these things really will get to you even more than the diseases, which are fairly straightforward. So have fun and love to talk and continue the dialogue anytime.
Dr. Blunt tomorrow, they will be at Northeast for their cooking competition, and before that's what I was going to do is walk them down to your exhibit.
Great. Yeah, it's good. I heard that's a great idea, by the way. I came across an ad for this exhibition that's online called diabetic bread, goat milk formula, and soda and cigarettes advertised in Journal of the American Medical Association. I found an ad from 1929 where the Johns Hopkins medical students were taking a course in cooking. So culinary medicine didn't begin recently. It's been there. So maybe we need to revive it, and you're doing it here. Thank you. Well, no, but Ashley does a lot more than, yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Blunt. We appreciate your time.
Yeah, always great.